You are listening to the Social Science KLAI-descope. What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Social Science KLAI-descope. Once again, I am joined by a very special guest, but before we get into that, be sure to follow the podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. And be sure to connect with me on my socials on Twitter at KMDLAI or on Instagram at KMLAIII. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. That's also cool too. All right. I don't want to delay any further because, well, like I said, I have a very special guest, someone that I had the fortune of meeting in college, and she is very driven in political science, and she is currently a PhD student, but also she's just like the sweetest person on earth. And so we have Sonya Chen today. Woo! All right, so that was just a little intro for you. Welcome to the show, and thank you so much for your time. How have you been?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. That was really a warm and kind welcome, and I feel very moved. I've been doing well, It's a hard time, but I think I'm hanging in there amidst everything and just trying to take it day by day, and be kind to myself about everything. Yeah. How about you? How have you been doing?
Yeah, more or less the same. Just, from working from home, it's been basically working in a box 5 days a week, 40-hour week. So basically just staying in one place working. And then for me, I had the fortune of being in New York City. So getting to go out, walk around, get some food, get some coffee, whatever the case may be. I'm also blessed to have some of my friends nearby. So definitely get to hang out with them as well. So it could be a lot worse than what I've experienced, but definitely not an ideal situation. It's good to hear that you're doing very well. I don't know who listens to my show out there, but I imagine some of us know who you are. But for those of us that don't know who you are, could you do another quick intro of yourself?
Sure. So I am a third-year PhD student in political science at Princeton. I've been in Princeton, I guess, since the beginning of the pandemic. I haven't left in almost, I guess, over a year now. But yeah, I guess in terms of me, I grew up partially in New Jersey and partially in Hong Kong. And my parents still live in Hong Kong. So I feel very tied to both of those places. Not New Jersey specifically, but I guess the US broadly and Hong Kong as well.
Cool. So I don't want to waste any time in jumping in. My first question is, how did you get into political science as a discipline? Was it from family? Was it from maybe an organization that you've interned for in the past? Or was it like a particular class that you took that moved you in undergrad?
Yeah, I think my path to political science was probably a mix of all of those things. I think, going to Swarthmore, which is a liberal arts college and really emphasizes more of a multidisciplinary approach, I was able to take lots of different classes in different departments that I got to really enjoy. So I don't think in undergrad I was really bound to any discipline besides the fact that, we do have to choose a major, and I did choose political science. And I think even though there are so many great disciplines out there, for me, political science is the place where I'm able to study how our society works in terms of how we distribute resources, how we share power, how we make decisions collectively. And really the thing that interests me about political science is I want to know how we make social change and some of the challenges that have to be undertaken to make that change, as well as what are the possibilities for that moving forward. So yeah, I think political science is where we can study kind of how power works and how we can make power and kind of give it to people more broadly, and hopefully make everyone better off. I think in terms of family, my parents are also both academics, and I think while that didn't necessarily have a direct impact, I don't think they ever particularly glamorized academia in any way. And of course, they're from a different generation, and also they work as academics in Hong Kong. I do think their love of reading and they really encouraged that in me from a young age probably had an impact on me. My parents often took me to bookstores and dropped me off at libraries. And I probably read a lot more fiction actually when I was younger. But I do think just that general approach and engagement with like text and ideas probably had an impact on me indirectly today.
Cool. It's really good to hear that you had very supportive parents in terms of they're working basically in the same space that you are right now or currently pursuing. On top of the fact that it seems like your undergraduate education has really spurred your love and interest and developed these interesting research questions that we will dive into. And so that's really cool to hear all of that. And so obviously, I'm not a political scientist, but I imagine that political science has a bunch of subfields under it. And so I just want to get a better sense of the subfield that you're currently working towards and what you find interesting within political science.
Yeah, so I study American politics, and that's kind of what we formally call the subfield. And under American politics, I study the politics of race, ethnicity, and identity. Specifically, I am interested in Asian American politics as well as multiracial politics. So, how different groups come together to work together for common political goals. Some other buzzwords I could throw in there are like immigration politics, community organizations, social movements. So yeah, it's a broad umbrella, and I think that keeps it interesting. And especially in this stage of a PhD program, I also wouldn't overstate, here are the exact things I study, because I think part of what's exciting about a PhD program is that you're able to explore these questions and keep developing your agenda and be open to revising your questions, discovering new things. So I think that's something I'm hoping to really embrace as well.
And I just kind of want to touch up on a couple of things. And so you mentioned you're interested in race and immigration and those things in political science. And of course, you know that currently, right now, there have been a lot of hate crimes against Asian American communities. And so I just kind of want to touch up on that. How have you been following this type of news? And what are you thinking about it from, the perspective of an academic?
Yeah, I think it's really touched me at both a personal and community level, and also sort of more of the academic side. I think personally, I've been on Instagram a lot, on Twitter, where I think a lot of the conversation is happening, and people are raising awareness there, but also discussing, how do we talk about this and how do we respond to this? And it's been really fascinating to follow that, because I don't remember any other instance where I've seen such collective conversation from the Asian American community. And I think partly that's because, social media has really given this platform for people. But I do think people are also coming into this sense of consciousness of what's happening. They're paying attention, they care, they want other people to care, and they want to know, like, what do we do about it? So what's really interesting to me about this conversation is how people are holding space for multiple truths at once. So what I mean by that is people are saying, we want to show our grief, we want to take up space, we want to tell other people to care, because there's, of course, a long history of Asian American struggles being just not really visible. And I think that helps play into the model minority myth, which ultimately upholds white supremacy. And we want to be able to take up that space, but we also want to be careful about how we take up that space, because I think some of the calls for how we respond has manifested in perhaps anti-Black racism or calling for more police, which then has detrimental consequences for Black and communities of color broadly. So, but I think those things we can hold together, right? Like we can claim some space and also be intentional about how we want to respond. So it's been really interesting to just follow how people are talking about this. And I think there's a lot of things that needs to be worked out within the community. And the Asian American community is so diverse. So people come from different ethnic origins. They live in different places in the US and, of course, have different political opinions. So seeing people work through some of this, on one hand, I'm like, oh my God, social media is too much for me sometimes. And that's not really the place for a productive conversation. But I also see a lot of amazing work that organizations are doing on the ground and sharing some updates on social media, maybe, which I think has been really amazing to follow and see. Some of these dynamics are things that I am thinking about, as myself as a role, myself as an Asian American person, but also as someone who studies Asian American politics. And I think those things can't be disentangled. And yeah, honestly, like at a more visceral level, it's really heartbreaking to see the acts of violence, and to just worry about the safety of people who I care about, and whether I know them personally or not. So yeah, I think that's the thing about studying Asian American politics is, it's an academic endeavor, but also like I think I try to allow myself to react purely emotionally too, because a lot of these issues are close to my heart.
Right, right. Yeah. And for me, at least, I completely resonate with that. Both my parents are in America, and I actually have like some relatives on my dad's side. They're also in America, and they live in
Mhm.
Texas, which is probably some like one of the most conservative states out there. And so I worry about, my parents or even my relatives in Texas who might face some kind of racial discrimination, um, you know, heaven forbid, but may
Right.
face some, acts of violence against them. And so that's like definitely something I worry about. A lot of places I frequent are Chinatown. And so to see that a lot of these hate crimes that happen in the neighborhoods where I really feel like I'm at home, it's really heartbreaking for me. And so I completely understand where you're coming from to feeling that at an emotional level.
Mhm.
And yes, like you said, it's great to see that there are a lot of organizations that have been helping with kind of addressing these issues. Um, One of which Dom was on the show last week, and he
Ah,
mentioned
awesome.
Welcome to Chinatown, and so that's one of the organizations I've heard, and I'm sure there are many others that are helping out there. And that's really cool to hear your academic take on this issue. Um,
Yeah, I don't know how academic that take was, but I think you're right in that, in these times where it can be really heartbreaking and scary, we also see these initiatives and these communities coming together and showing strength in different ways. So I think that's something that's been really great to see that's coming out of it.
and so I'm actually kind of curious how you want to contribute to this these research interests that you have. Is it only producing more research, publications, such that there are more academics that are aware of the types of things that you're interested in? Or is it maybe creating an organization in the future, like heading an organization in the future, um, to promote a sense of community, to promote maybe like a particular political agenda or topic?
Yeah, I'm really excited that you asked that question because I think for me, being in academia has never been only about research. And I know for a lot of people, research is what really drives them to be in academia, and I completely respect that. But I think for me, and a lot of other scholars are like this too, but it's really the mix of research and politics in the sense of the practice of politics, especially at the community level. And of course, the third part is teaching. On one level, I really do hope to contribute to research, and I'm really excited about the possibilities of research that's not solely relegated to, an academic journal that's online and sits on the internet for who knows how long, and is only read by like other academics and is dense or not accessible. Like that's really not the kind of research I hope to do. I'm really, and I'm still figuring this out too, right? Like, how do we combine academic research, but also community-based politics? And I think it's it's something that a lot of academics are trying to work on and find ways to do, because at some level, the academy just really doesn't incentivize that in graduate programs. If you're going to an academic job and trying to get tenure, no one cares if you're doing like community-based work. They want to know if you're producing research, and especially they want to see certain ranked journals or whatever their standards look like. But even though, so I think that's, given these incentives, that's why the question is a little bit complicated. But I do think, that's such a core reason of why I wanted to go into academia is I do see a lot of potential for partnership between like academic research and community politics. So for me, I'm not so much interested in like starting anything new, because I think there's just so much great work that's being done out there already, especially by progressive Asian American organizations. And I would characterize what I hope to do as more of supporting this existing work, and maybe if there's any way that I could help them grow, that would be really fantastic. Whether that's using some of the resources from the academy, producing accessible research, telling stories that matter. And it all sounds a bit vague because I don't think there's a defined model for that, but I'm hoping that my research will be able to center Asian American communities, not as me kind of looking down and just extracting insights from that, but really working with maybe organizations or individuals and trying to produce research that we all care about, that we all can read and use, and hopefully be in pursuit of more progressive politics.
Hearing that answer, like it kind of struck something with me is because when I was thinking about pursuing a PhD, it was mainly for the expertise. And so I think the expertise is a super valuable tool. For one, it's like people will kind of look up to you and maybe listen to you. And from that moment on, it just depends on kind of the things that someone would produce. And so if that thing that you produce is research, that's great. But also, what would possibly be more useful is if the research is very accessible, very friendly to a wider range of audience, and especially like you mentioned, something that can impact a community or promote some kind of change.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the really cool things about this podcast too, is because different people in academia have different purposes, and I think that's what makes it exciting. And we all do research for different reasons. And I like that you're asking us kind of what our purpose is in some way, because going through a PhD program and trying to fulfill all of these benchmarks, I think sometimes, going through the motions of doing research or doing the program more broadly, it can be easy to lose sight of what brought us here in the first place. So I really appreciate this at this point to reflect, and obviously we don't have all the answers, but just to think through it and keep trying to figure out what it looks like. Because of course it's not so easy to just ignore the incentives, and at some level you have to play by the rules, but also you don't want to lose sight of your purpose. So it's a tricky balance, and I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm sure a lot of us are. And it's an ongoing process.
Definitely. That being said, you are a third year PhD student. Basically being done with classes, was there a particular class that in your PhD coursework that you really enjoyed, or maybe something that you regret that you want to share?
Ooh, that's a bold question. I'll go with the enjoy. I think, a lot of PhD classes are focused on getting you through the core tenets of a discipline. So essentially working through the canon and hitting all the important pieces, the important theoretical questions. And I think personally, I struggle a little bit with that because a lot of the canon in American politics, for example, can be pretty old and the discipline looked very different, 10, 20 years ago, where it was primarily white men writing. So I think that the canon is something I've struggled with, but the classes that I've really liked are the classes that where we engage with the canon and, at some level, like in academia, you have to build on what came before you, even if even if you don't think it's that great or there's problems with it. But you build on it.
Right.
But the classes that engage with it, but also think about, okay, how do we move forward? How do we build new literatures? I think those are the classes that are really fascinating to me. Like they're critical of the canon and but it's not just about criticizing. We want to be able to put new things in its place and figure out what is it that we actually do want. It's of course it's easier. I think in grad seminars we get really good at criticizing stuff, but we're not always really good at figuring out what we would replace it with and coming up with those new ideas. Mm-hmm. So that's a long way of saying that the classes that I've liked the most are the classes that have that kind of approach, and they do that within political science, and they're also bringing insights from other disciplines and kind of bridging that. And I think that has a lot to do with the professor who's teaching the course as well. So two of my classes taught by my now advisor, Dara Stralovich. The two classes are interest groups and social movements in American politics and gender and sexuality in American politics. And I think those two classes, the content is really interesting, but I think the approach is really what brings it home for me.
And it kind of makes sense too, because like the two classes that you mentioned that you really enjoyed actually tie into some of your research interests as well. And so those kind of like interact with each other. And so that's really cool to hear. So that's kind of like what I wanted to know about your personal journey in some sense. I actually was curious, are you working on any research projects right now that you're interested in sharing?
So I'm currently in the process of writing my dissertation proposal. So that's what we do throughout the third year. And it's basically like a 20 to 30 page proposal of what we then will write in your however long dissertation. So it's a really interesting exercise because, you haven't done anything for your dissertation yet, but you're trying to imagine what you might say, trying to think about the questions you care about and like how you'll answer them. So anyway, I'm working through that currently, and essentially what I'm working on is related to a lot of what we talked about with regards to Asian American politics, but I'm trying to understand how Asian Americans navigate their position in the American racial order, and specifically this kind of ambiguous position where, among people of color, some Asian Americans do have relative privilege, but also Asian Americans, of course, experience a lot of exclusion. They have, historically and also today. I'm trying to understand how they understand their position in American politics and then how that shapes in their different forms of political action, political engagement. And I'm also really interested in just the sheer diversity of Asian Americans. Asian American is this politically constructed identity, and there's nothing inherent that brings together like a Chinese person with a Bangladeshi person. But there is some intention behind the group construction where it has its roots in the 1960s as a political identity. And the identity was a lot more radical back then too. Right now it's like a demographic identity, but when it was created, it was meant to bring different ethnicities under this Asian American label, and it was meant to take a stance as anti-imperialist, anti-war, and as well as stand in solidarity with the Black liberation movement. So I feel like a lot of that identity is lost today, where we just kind of think, it's a demographic. So that's to say that because it's a politically constructed identity, people understand it differently. And there's a lot of active work to try to give meaning to the identity. So I'm trying to understand how diverse the community is, but also how we come together under this politically constructed identity. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of my dissertation. I'm still trying to work through some of the specifics, but those are the questions that interest me. And then I feel like we're all kind of working on side things that often fall by the wayside as we try to like keep up with teaching and dissertation stuff. But I have a few side projects that mostly focus on multiracial politics. So in terms of how different racial groups form coalitions with one another, what are the conditions under which different groups come together and cooperate for common political goals. And these are all like projects with other people. I think I would find it really hard to work on side projects alone, especially when I'm already working on a dissertation. But working with other people is really exciting. We get to bounce ideas off of each other. And, you know, it's just the project looks so different when you have multiple minds working on it versus if you're just kind of thinking about it yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Once again, best of luck with all the projects you have going on. It seems like a lot. And looking forward to it in its completed form a couple years down the line. So, very excited about that. You mentioned teaching, actually, and I think that's a really cool part of the PhD program where you actually have some hands-on experience to teach undergrads, or maybe, is it only undergrads, I think?
Yeah, there's some people who teach grads too,
Okay.
but I've only taught undergrads so
Okay.
far.
But anyways, to say it's very interesting that you get an opportunity to teach before you actually have to teach as like for as a full-time job. And so, if you decide to become a professor, of course.
Mhm.
How's that been so far?
Yeah, I am really excited about teaching because it's one of the things that motivated me to go into academia in the first place. And my third year is the first year I've been in this teaching role where I'm basically a TA. I run discussion sections for a professor. So last semester, I TA'd a class called The Politics of Crime and Punishment. And this semester, I am TAing a class on immigration politics. And yeah, I mean, I've only TA'd on Zoom so far, so that's been an entirely different experience of its own. I almost feel like I haven't gotten the full experience yet because I haven't been in a classroom and teaching on Zoom. The pedagogy I think is very different from if we were in person. So yeah, it's been a learning curve. You know, I it's a mix of preparing for class, but also it's a lot of thinking on the spot and engaging with what students bring up. And for me personally, you know, I think I'm much better at preparing things, but but being on the spot, I think, can sometimes be challenging. And even though I really love it, I think especially this semester, my students are really engaged in thinking about immigration politics. I think sometimes for me, I when I say things on the spot or stuff like that after class, I'm like thinking back to how class went, and sometimes I can be hard on myself where I'm
Mm,
like, oh, I should have said this, or that question wasn't really phrased well, you know. And I think it's been a process of trying to be kind to myself and not take not just not be too hard on myself because I think a lot of teaching just comes with experience and just gradually learning from your past experiences. Um, but yeah, I think overall, like I have been enjoying it a lot, and it makes me excited for when I can eventually design my own classes because right now I'm TAing, right? So I'm working with a set syllabi, and that's exciting, but there's not as much flexibility, and I have to kind of go with the professor's goals and visions, and that makes me excited for one day, like when I can put all my favorite works on a syllabi. And yeah, I'm sure it's a lot of work, so I don't want to glamorize it too much, but
right.
I am excited for that eventual stage if I do get there.
Right, but I mean, also you're just kind of disseminating knowledge based off of what you really enjoy. So definitely, there's really good reason to be excited for that and to somewhat glamorize it. And so this is a very hypothetical question, but if you could teach any class, what would that class be? And how would you design that class?
It's funny because my partner is also in academia, and I bother him with this question like all the time because I think it's such a fun question. I mean, you don't even have to be in academia to like be able to dream up, what you would want to teach. Like, I feel like everyone has, if you think about it, can have this class you really want to teach. But I have thought about this question because that's apparently I think about that in my free time. And I would really, really love to teach a class that combines like political science and fiction. And I think specifically, it would be really cool to teach that for Asian American politics and Asian American fiction. So unfortunately, I don't have like a exciting class name, a title, but um, I'm and also like I don't know if that's really a class that I would be allowed to teach, especially if I weren't tenured, because I don't think there's like a model for that. I mean, I'm sure someone is doing it somewhere, but I'm excited about combining political science and fiction because I think there's just like political science is more of identifying trends and making kind of general statements or general theories, but I think fiction allows us to zoom in and think about the specifics and maybe think about like emotions and different ways to use language. And I think it would just be such a cool combination to bridge social science and fiction and teach that in the class. So that's just me dreaming big.
Yeah.
And I would be thrilled to be able to do that one day.
Yeah, of course. Dream big for the course that you want to teach. And it's really funny because I also asked this question. I remember I asked this question to you like, what was it, a year ago when I saw you in person before COVID. Like we were at a bar or something like that, and I asked you that question, and you seemed pretty excited. But I think, in some sense, from my recollection, it kind of changed a little bit from then. So thank you so much for
Yeah,
sharing that.
really.
A little bit, I think.
What should I
Anyways,
say? Well, what would your like dream class be?
what would my dream class be?
Hmm.
I would probably do something regarding so before when I was actually like as a research analyst, like I thought about it like what I was interested in. I really enjoyed kind of um international capital markets, and so just the idea of how money moves between different countries just fascinate me, and for what reason. Um
Hmm.
Especially the Panama Papers, those types of offshore movements or somewhat illegal, uh, those are kind of fascinating, and understudied, and rightfully so because a lot of the data would be secretive. But I think that's definitely a space that I would, want to explore or maybe kind of teach about. But
Hmm.
now, when I'm thinking about it, because of COVID, in some sense, like I've been doing a lot of gaming
Hmm.
with my friends, and so I've been doing, especially in esports games, and so we're talking like League of Legends and um, Valorant, and so a bunch of competitive games that have like their own scene, their own franchising, and so probably something to do with that in combination with economics.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't know anything about those topics, but I would totally take your classes.
And yeah, I would also take your class too. I think that's really, really, really cool. How you're bridging basically all your interests in one thing, and it's definitely super relevant both in terms of what people are writing about and what some people are reading about as well. Speaking of reading, I know you have a bookstagram because I follow it. Is that what they call it, bookstagram, right?
Yeah, that is what they call it.
Okay, so I am following your bookstagram, um, and I'm so curious. How did that come about? Like, how did you decide to start it?
So I didn't even know Bookstagram was a thing. Like I thought I was just making an Instagram where I was going to post pictures of my reads and use the space to just reflect on them a little bit. And I started this in what was it? I think fall of 2018. So after we had graduated from college, and I was hoping to get back into reading for fun since it's something I really loved when I was little, but in high school and college, I just didn't basically didn't do any of it because I think I just fell out of it and didn't prioritize it, had a lot of school readings, So yeah, so I thought I was making an Instagram to record my reads and to better remember what I was reading because I also think I forget a lot of what I read. But little did I know there was like a word for this, Bookstagram, and it's not just a kind of Instagram, but it's a whole community of people. So that was a really exciting find. There's just lots of people who do this thing where people post pictures of their reads and write about them, and it's really a community where we like comment on each other's posts, we share recs, discuss books. So yeah, that was a really exciting kind of sub find, and I really quickly fell into just like engaging with this community that exists on the small corner of the internet.
Cool. Yeah, I secretly like, well, maybe not so secretly, but like I definitely look at the posts a lot and your stories a lot, and I think you do a really good job with summarizing the books that you've read. That and like, of course, like some of these books I don't really read a lot, and a lot of these books I didn't even know existed, but they have some kind of really cool topic, and you give a really amazing synopsis of the book, or maybe some kind of advertisement for the book in some sense. And hopefully that will spur my interest for reading once again, but we'll see about that. What types of books do you typically read and review? Like what genre?
I usually try to read across genre. Of course, there are a few that I find myself returning to. So I read a lot of fiction, contemporary, historical. I also really like essays and creative nonfiction. So how would I define creative nonfiction? I think it's usually a blend of maybe like personal insights, a bit of memoir, and a bit of like maybe political historical analysis. So yeah, like a nonfiction space where authors are just bringing in all these different strands and tying them together. I really, really like that as well. And I also really like young adult novels. I feel like I need to read a young adult novel every now and then because they're usually like pretty wholesome. Um, Even though, of course they have like some tension, conflict, something maybe serious going on, but generally I think they make me excited. They're just wholesome, and there's been a lot of great young adult novels that are being published now, and I wish I had them when I was younger.
Mhm.
But I think generally my reading is not really bound by genre, but I'm just excited to discover books that use language in a unique way and are able to capture different experiences, or provide really good analysis. And I also like books that have like some critical commentary on like identity or like belonging. Um, Even if they're fiction, a lot of great fiction has commentary through their characters or plotline or anything like that.
And of course, with when you're promoting things on social media, or you have an audience that kind of maybe would expect you to post somewhat regularly or somewhat frequently, there's definitely maybe instances of burning out. And so, could you kind of describe some of the challenges you face in terms of creating this content, or is it all just really fun and you really just enjoy doing every bit of it?
Oh, it's definitely a mixed bag. Like right at this moment, I'm at a stage of burnout from my Bookstagram, and that comes and goes in waves. Where, like, I think probably with most creators on social media, like, I guess I don't really consider myself a content creator
Hmm.
because that's not really why I started my
Right.
Bookstagram. But I almost feel like I have accidentally become one. Um, which I think creates these new dynamics and new challenges. So one of them is, I started this Bookstagram to have a space to just reflect on my reads. And I don't think I ever intended it to be a place where I was giving recommendations. It's my reflection. And if my reflection appeals to you, that's great. But I wouldn't ever want to be responsible for like giving a false recommendation or something. But in some ways, like as people started following me, I did feel like I had to be more outward facing. Like I felt like maybe I had to give more synopsis, or I had to give some sort of like neatly packaged conclusion about the book, like would recommend, or mm, I don't know, would kind of recommend.
Yeah.
But I felt like I needed to have more like tightly packaged captions. And I think I maybe ventured into that for a while, but it became really exhausting because I just wanted to be able to reflect on my books um, and hopefully I am excited when the reviews speak to people and when people comment or message me. I really love that part that people are engaging. But at some point, I think I had to take a step back and like think about who I was posting for. And sometimes it's also nice to read a book and not have to post about it and not have to articulate ideas.
Right.
Like, I just want to read a book, finish it, and think, hey, that was a great book, and put it on my shelf and then move on and maybe never post about it. And I think that's exciting too, right? Like, it's reading can be a private experience. And at some point, it was tiring that my reading was always public.
Hmm.
Um, so I think I've kind of evolved where, now I don't always review every single book I read. I review books that I want to. And I try not to stress about posting all the time. Like, I think there is a pressure to post all the time, but I try not to think about it too much and just be fine with um, not doing it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, for what it's been worth, you mentioned like you started this in 2018 and it's been growing and it's kind of been stayed big too. So I mean, you must be doing something right there. So many successes there, and hopefully it doesn't burn you out too much. And so now I just wanted to kind of end on a fun note. So I have a game, and I
Mm.
call it the Q&A game, and where I will ask a question and you quickly answer um, to the question. And of course, if you have any follow up, just feel free to follow up. So are you ready?
Yeah, I guess I am.
First question. Last thing you ate?
I had Japanese curry with carrots and potato and tofu katsu and rice. That was for dinner.
Wow, sounds lovely. Second
Yeah.
question. What is your favorite color?
Light blue.
Light blue. Okay. Third question. Last thing you did outside the house?
I went on a socially distant walk with my partner and two of our friends, and we tried this new matcha place in town.
Cool. Fourth question. Last song you listened to?
Oh, that's hard. I just like play my playlist and kind of zone out. I've been really into like Arlo Parks recently, a
Okay.
new artist I discovered, probably something by them.
Okay. Fifth question. Last item you purchased?
Um, I went to the bookstore yesterday and I got some new books.
Okay. Understandable. Sixth question. Give an estimate of the number of books you have.
Oh my God. I actually forgot the exact number now, but I think I have maybe like 150 to 200 books.
Goodness. That's a lot of books. Seventh question. Biggest pet peeve.
Biggest pet peeve. Um, when people don't follow through with their word,
Okay.
but like if they do it like accidentally, that's fine. But I think if it's a consistent thing, and yeah, I don't like that.
Okay. Next question. How many hours of sleep do you get per night on average?
Oh my God, I'm like a baby. I sleep about 9 hours every night, and if I don't sleep 9 hours, I get pretty cranky and tired.
Oh, okay. Final question. One thing you miss about Swarthmore College?
Oh, I miss friends. And I miss like obviously you and like all of our friends. And I think if I want to be more specific, it's just the fact that we were always so close to each other. Like, we were 5 minutes away. You could always find someone really quickly. And that we were just like living life together. Like now when you see friends, it's like you catch up, maybe you do like an activity together, you go eat or watch a movie. I mean, not now because,
Right.
well, if you can do it safely now, but in pre-COVID times. But I think at SWA, we were just kind of like living our lives together and doing really mundane things. And I think that was really, really great. And you don't really get that in any other place besides college. So,
Yeah, definitely. Miss you too.
Yeah. Oh. Well, I'm glad we got
Anyways,
to do this though. This is like a it's like a podcast, but it's also like
yeah.
a way to catch up
This is
too.
just
So
basically a normal conversation between me and Sonya, anyways. So it was really nice to catch up with you there. Anyways, that was all the questions I have for you. Thank you so much once again for joining the show. I definitely, even though I've known you for since 2015 or something like that, so now it's what? It's been like
yeah,
7 years, 6 years, maybe
yeah.
even
Oh
eight
my
years.
gosh.
Like even though we've known each other for that long, there's still some things that like I learned today. I don't know if that says
Oh
something about me as being a bad friend or not,
no, no, not at all.
but yeah, no, I was really excited to hear about some of the things you shared, and learn about kind of your motivations and just kind of background stories to things that I hear about on the surface level. So really cool to hear that. Before we go, is there anything you want to plug?
My bookstagram is Sonya Reads Stuff. So that's where I probably am the most active on the internet.
Cool, sounds good. I will also post that in the description, so don't worry if you did not catch that. Once again, thank you so much for your time, Sonia. It was really great to catch up with you, and I felt like we had a really good conversation. It's been like an hour and 8 minutes of recording, so
Oh
there's
wow.
definitely a lot of to talk about. Time flies when we're having fun, and yeah, just thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. And this was a lot of fun. And I'm really glad we got to catch up too.
Great, that's really good to hear. Anyways, for the audience out there, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Social Science Kaleidoscope. I will hope to see you all next time.